So today's June 4th, 2026. It's about 8 a.m. in the morning, and I'm just coming back from Greece, where I was there for about 2 weeks, and I've got, a couple of different reflections about my experience there. And, one of the things that happens when you travel is that it always ends up being different than you imagine it, like most experiences in life. And travel is one of those things where there's your expectations, and your expectations meet reality, and then you are left with the experience, and whether you can value it and treasure it and learn from it, or whether it's something that you're scarred by, is kind of the open question there. But I will say that, my instant reaction in the discussion would be is like, what is Greece like as a place where you would go on vacation? And like a lot of things, it really depends on who you are, where you're at in your life, where you've been, what you're doing, and what you're like. And so for me, I was disappointed in many ways, and and really enjoyed it, and had a tremendous amount of great experiences at the same time, but I will say that my overwhelming reaction, aside from, the great things that I did and the fun that I had, was I felt misled. And I'll tell you why I felt misled. I knew that Greece was a poor country. I knew it was the poorest country in the EU before I went there. I knew that it would have issues, and I knew this decades ago. It's not a new idea. But what I didn't realize when I went to Greece is that there is a concerted effort on the part of people who are selling Greece to misrepresent what it's like. And in all of my trips all over the world, I've never experienced a situation in which I've been more misled about what the experience was like. And I'm upset about it. I'll be very, very frank about it. And I put it to you this way, which is, in Greece, you're going to be paying prices like you're in Italy, and you're going to be having an experience like you're in Albania. It's a very, very poor EU country with, a rotting infrastructure. Athens is an unbelievable shithole in terms of the amount of graffiti that is from one end to the other of that poor city. And I am certain there are plenty of people who are incredibly upset about it, but for whatever reason, the Greeks have decided to capitulate to what is really, just a very unfortunate and disgusting display, And for Americans, that can be very unnerving. And by the way, I'm just talking about Athens right now, which I'll return to, actually. I should be really talking about Greek and Greece in general, which, again, is a poorer country. It's dirty. It's crowded. It's Europe, so it's not really that different from a lot of places that I've been to in Europe. But I paid some pretty premium prices for flying way the hell out there. I flew all the way to Frankfurt, and then I flew from Frankfurt to Athens, and then I flew from Athens to Heraklion, and I paid a bunch of money to go to Crete and Greece and see what it was like. And I don't really feel like there is a good value there for people. And I've heard that stated many ways by a lot of other people before. And so that's sort of my immediate reaction. As a traveler, I would not go back to Greece. But again, that has a lot to do with who I am and where I'm from and what I've been. And one of the things that really is a big draw for Greece is the ancient ruins. The Acropolis is really one of the top 5 experiences in the world in terms of like this ancient culture. It's really remarkable in its own right. But elsewhere in Greece, the ruins are really pretty non-existent. There's really not much left of what we see as Greece. Like if you go to Rome and you go to Italy, a country like that, you're going to see astonishing, remarkable, earth-shaking ruins. Like the Roman Forum is incomparable, and the Acropolis is nothing like that. And that was sort of what I was half expecting. I was expecting to see some really, really great stuff. And I did see some great stuff. I'm not going to lie. Okay. I went to see the Temple of Poseidon. I was there at the Acropolis. You know, I saw the Palace of Knossos. But it's really in pretty terrible shape compared to most of the ruins that I'm accustomed to. And I really went to Greece in large part to have an experience with this ancient culture, the cornerstone of our Western civilization. And there's frankly nothing fucking left of it. You know, like the museum underneath the Acropolis, I found underwhelming. Nothing compared to, you know, the museums in Rome again. And I'm comparing it. I'm sorry, I'm going to. And the ruins elsewhere, like the Palace of Knossos, was just sort of, you know, just not really making the grade. And so I'm going to be honest about that. You know, the other side of it is the Greek island experience, the Mediterranean. Crete is supposed to be the #1 island that you went to, so I went there, and I was there for about 9 days. And here's where there's sort of a different experience. The Mediterranean is absolutely beautiful, and the sparkling clear turquoise water is unmatched, and the swimming, you know, is safe. You know, you're not going to get killed standing on a beach like you can here in California. You know, your whole family gets wiped out because you just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's beautiful. It's safe. It's relaxing. But for somebody who's been to Hawaii 8 times, it's also really underwhelming. It's beautiful in its own way, but, you know, Hawaii blows it away completely in almost every way, you know, except for the Greek islands, where I think I could have taken a private boat out and seen some amazing rock formations and swam in some cool sea caves. And I'd be willing to bet there's some stuff out there like that. In fact, I've seen the pictures of it, you know. But I went to the lagoon at Balos, which is supposed to be the iconic recommended place that you're supposed to go. And it was cold, and it wasn't particularly interesting to me. You know, I laid my towel down on some sand that looked dry, and it immediately went soaked. And, you know, so for a family, you know, who's been to Hawaii, like I said, 8 times and has, you know, been, you know, snorkeling with manta rays at night and stuff like that, you're not going to be blown away by anything probably that happens in the Mediterranean. You know, it's a more subtle, calm, soothing, beautiful, safe experience. You know, and by the same token, you're not going to get eaten by a tiger shark or killed by a wave. You know, so there's really something to be said for the slow pace and the style of what's happening there. And I did have a really great experience with this guy, Captain, I don't know if I'm saying his name, Tassos, or, you know, out of Plakias, Crete. He took my kids fishing. The guy was wonderful. The kids absolutely loved it. It was the high point of the trip. I would do it again. We didn't catch any fish, didn't eat anything, but I don't really care. That wasn't really the point. It would have been great, you know, but I think my wife would have got seasick, so they were afraid to take her out. Nobody's fault. They were wonderful. Absolutely. And the Australian guy that was on the ship, high point of the trip, it was freaking beautiful. They gave us these little scooters that we cruised around in the crystal clear water with, and just, you know, A+ to those guys. You know, that was like, but like to fly out all the way out to Crete to have that one experience, I don't know if I agree with that. You know, that's kind of where I'm at, is like really one of the interesting things about how it all played out is one of the parts that I almost wanted to skip turned out to be the most valuable part, which is here's how the trip went, which is, and it's a good example of how it all kind of works. So we flew into Athens and spent the night. We were going to fly to, you know, Crete and land in Heraklion the next day. And so we're there in Athens, and I've heard Athens is a total shithole, you know. But the hotel we stayed at outside of the airport had this beautiful church next to it, and this pleasant little neighborhood, and we went and had some chicken skewers and some Greek food, and the guy was wonderful, and it was, you know, it was totally a great experience. So there wasn't any graffiti or anything like that, you know, and so it was kind of like I would go back there, and that was the airport hotel, you know. So that was a great positive experience. Then we flew into Heraklion, which, you know, is, you know, kind of industrial, and the airport's kind of gross and run down, and you know, the guy rented us a 5-speed Skoda, you know, and the clutch wasn't working correctly, or I just don't remember how to drive one. I'm not going to necessarily blame him. But it was a really interesting experience. The guy comes up to us and he's got like a piece of paper, you know, like there's no computer or anything like that. He's like, here you go. You write the sign and, you know, here are the keys. You know, it's like this Greek comedian, you know, I saw, you know, it's like very informal, you know. And so we drove off, and then I had to trade the car in for a tiny little automatic that we shoved ourselves in. And they drove up to this beautiful villa up on the top of the hill that overlooked Crete in these olive orchards, you know, and it was absolutely stunning up there. You know, subtle beauty, not like spectacular beauty, but kind of a subtle beauty, a relaxing beauty. And it was made of stone, and it was a beautiful house. And then we went to the Palace of Knossos, which we had this guide who's, you know, she tried to make it interesting, but, you know, and it was interesting to me as an adult, you know, to me, but again, that's one of the experiences of Greece is that, like, if you think you're going to be seeing like ancient ruins and stuff, you know, that are going to blow your mind, that might not be the case. You know, it was pretty underwhelming, frankly, you know. And one of the things that I know about it, because I read up on it, is this guy, I think Evans is his name, came in and he painted stuff and bolted it on things and moved it all around. So it's really not necessarily what it actually was like. It's kind of been abused by the English. So anyway, and I scheduled my plane wrong, so we wanted to stay 2 days and deal with the jet lag in Heraklion, which would have been great because we were just up on a hill, even though it scared the shit out of my daughter driving up the tiny little roads. So we go, and we're there on the top of the mountain. We don't have a day, so we drive down the highway to Hania, basically. And I think we tried to stay in Rethymno, or just go and see like the Venetian fortress in Rethymno, which, if you know Crete, the island's set up like this. There's Heraklion, Rethymno, and Hania, sort of like at different ends of the island. It's like kind of shaped like the Dominican Republic or Puerto Rico. So we ended up in Hania, which is this beautiful town. It's got this really amazing Venetian front with old buildings, and we stayed at this Airbnb that sat and it looked over, you know, the little Venetian old town, and there's like a lighthouse there, you know, and these ancient streets that you can kind of wander through, and there's cats everywhere, and it's got this Venetian thing going because the Venetians conquered, you know, large parts of the Mediterranean, so their influences there, basically. And so we had some pretty great food. We listened to a little music, and then we stayed at another weird Airbnb there, which had like a hot tub in the middle of the room. It was pretty crazy. So I liked Hania. I thought it was beautiful, but as far as, like, again, being experienced in traveling through Europe, it's not something that I'm gonna go, wow, this is a one-night thing, a stopover. You know, it's not Prague, you know, that's going to blow your mind. It's more like this beautiful, subtle, kind of relaxing thing that maybe an old person like me would like. But the kids were underwhelmed for the most part. The only thing that saved us was Captain Tassos, whatever, Sassos. So I was almost going to shit can the other part of the trip. We were scheduled to go down the south coast in a place called Plakias, on the Libyan Sea, you know, which, like I said, I almost didn't want to do because I was afraid that it was going to bore the hell out of the kids. And I just decided, you know what, I'm going to go because, you know, I was arguing with my AI agent, Claude, and he said, no, you should do that. That's how weird my life is now. I'm like arguing with computers now. And it turned out to be a really good idea because it was this beautiful villa. And it sat there looking out over the beach. It had a swimming pool that was too cold to swim in. And it was, you know, it was a little bit like, it's kind of this Mexican style construction. It's kind of like, it's nice and looks nice and it's new, but, you know, there's like holes in the walls and things like that. You know, it was nice though. And it was really pleasant, and it was sunny, and it was relaxing, and there was plenty of parking, and so it slowed the whole trip down for a couple of days, and I was very glad. Might have been, in fact, the best part of the whole trip is just sitting there. I could have stayed there the whole 14 days and just wandered around to different beaches and stuff like that. So it was a very slow little town. And then, like a lot of things, the more you explore and read up on it, the more you just discover things that are right there. And so again, we went on the fishing trip, and me and my wife ate dinner up the hill. It looked over the Libyan Ocean and the coastline, and it was incredibly beautiful. And the food was actually pretty great. And so like that experience kind of like made me, I compared it to Albania, which is really probably a fair comparison. Greece is more like Albania, Montenegro, and Croatia, but charging Italian, German prices, and maybe more like Mexico in a way. Like Greece is like the Mexico of Europe in a way. The Europeans go there because they don't have access to beaches where they live. They want to be somewhere sunny. Their choice is Spain, or the south coast of France or Italy. In Greece for them is the hotter and warmer ocean, and so really that's kind of their Mexico in a way. It's like Greece is like a very safe Mexico overrun by Europeans. So if you're a Californian and you can go down to the beaches in San Diego, or you can go to Baja California, and you don't mind potentially getting mugged, or anywhere in Mexico for that matter, if you're not afraid of the danger, your probably best bet is to go down there if you feel safe. Like Greece is like a very safe Mexico in some sense. Like that's really what it serves. So if you're, like I said, if you're Californian, I could have just flown to Hawaii, and the wild beaches and waves and like unbelievable wildlife there in the middle of the Pacific is mind-blowing, and that's one of the things is I realize how spoiled I am when I have these experiences, because the Europeans, I don't feel sorry for them because their lives are great. This is the best they can do most of the time, is fly down to Greece and see something like that. They're not going to see maybe further down, but they're not going to see what we see here and kind of take for granted. Even New Yorkers can go down to the Bahamas and stuff like that. East Coasters can go down to the Caribbean, which is, I've never been to. Well, that's not true. I've been to like Key West, I think, which was okay. I don't know. So that was my experience. So then we left Plakias and we went to Athens, and this is the part that it flat out pissed me off, is driving into Athens. I just found it disgusting in the amount of graffiti that was there. Like it scared my kids. As an American, when you see graffiti like that, you're not safe. You believe that if you're in an American city that looks like that, you are 1 minute from being mugged and robbed, shot, beaten, stabbed. America's a dangerous place depending on where you're at, let's face it. And that's a place, if that was America, you're looking at that, you're going, this is a place where the police have totally lost control and there's no safety here. And so that's the feeling that you get. And as the days progressed, you begin to realize that's actually not the case, that Athens and Greece, like I said, is for the most part a very safe place. Like the fact that they allow that shit, I think says really nothing good about their approach to government and the way they look at the government. They were ruled for the Ottomans for like 400 years. So they still got this mindset where like, we don't want to pay taxes, fuck the government, they're not on our side. They're not realizing they're not ruled by the Ottomans anymore. So they're pissed off at their own government, and they're shooting themselves in the foot by allowing that kind of stuff to go on. This is like one of the cautionary tales of leftism out of control. And I'm left-winger, so understand that, a liberal Democrat. The logical resolution of what happens when you go too far is exactly what happens in Greece, which is like, it's just embarrassing and revolting and undignified, and I felt misled. So like when I went and stayed in the hotel which had this beautiful Acropolis view, they made sure that the photographs didn't show the graffiti that I could see from my window, or the broken rundown building, abandoned building sitting in the middle, which is everywhere in Greece. I mean, you're sitting there next to this $1,000 a night hotel, and there's this completely destroyed ramshackle building right next to it, covered with graffiti and stuff like that. And it makes no sense. I cannot defend it for the life of me, I don't understand why they allow it. They've simply capitulated to this element of their society. And you know, I know it has a lot to do with the fact their history. This is a nation that sat at the margin of conflicts, you know, for a very, very long time. It's got, like I said, the Ottomans controlled it for 400 years or something like that. You know, there you got the Balkans up north, you've got Rome on the other side. You know, even after World War II, there was a civil war in Greece for like 5 years or something like that. So it's not like Italy, you know, because when a society and a government and a culture sit at the center of these kinds of conflicts, I think it does something. And I think that's what you're seeing there, you know. But anyway, you know, I found it wonderful to walk up in Plaka. You know, there's this little area of Plaka. The Acropolis was phenomenal, you know, I'm not going to lie. The archaeological museum was beautiful. The food was pretty great. There's these cool little gritty neighborhoods like this place called Siri where my hotel was on the edge of. And it was kind of weird and cool, you know, like, and I found myself charmed by it. Frankly, even though I was pissed off about, you know, the appearance and all the graffiti, I kind of got used to it in a way. Learned to accept it, and found myself really, you know, kind of enjoying myself. We took a day trip to the Temple of Poseidon and saw this amazing sunset. That was wonderful. We went to this lake and had fish eating our toes. You know, it's really pretty weird. Like, they have these fish that can eat the flesh off of your toes, basically, and like get rid of the dead skin, so you end up getting exfoliated. So you're sitting there, and you can pay to do that too in Athens. If you walk along, there's these fish tanks with people's feet in them, and they're eating away at your toes. It's kind of hilarious. But, you know, you can go to this lake, and it's a thermal lake that feeds into the ocean, and you can sit there and sunbathe and have the fish chew on your feet. We also did that, and we had a really great meal looking over the ocean. But one of the things that, you know, you have to understand, and this is the point of the video in many ways, is it's a different country than what is represented. So number one, there is no ancient Greek culture like Socrates and Aristotle and Plato and all of that stuff. That's back then. Those guys are gone, and they were sort of weird anyway compared to the normal, you know, to the modern Greeks who are weird in their own way. These are just different people. The ancient Greeks are gone. The modern Greeks are here. They're smoking cigarettes all over the place. You know, they're smoking cigarettes while they're driving their cabs, and they're smoking cigarettes while they're doing construction work. And they're basically like, you know, living their lives and you know, living in this country, and they're doing the best they can with, you know, kind of a difficult situation. But, you know, one of the things about it that I found remarkable was, again, that's all gone, and it's not even very well preserved, and not even really a part of their culture in a lot of ways. And what is left is completely different. And in many ways, you know, more Byzantine and you know, Balkan and, you know, Croatian than it is Greek, I guess, is one way you could look at it. So that was one of the things that occurred to me. And also the customer service. You know, there's all this bullshit about, oh, the Greeks are so friendly, they're going to invite you to your fucking house, and you're going to be sitting there, like, listening to music, and they're going to be making the meals. It wasn't like that. And I'm certain that's because, in part, I wasn't in the right place at the right time, and, you know, there's all of that. But the fact is that they were no different from any of the other Europeans, you know, who, like, frankly, in all of my travels have been mostly pretty awesome, pretty nice, you know, but normal. Like, you know, they're I wouldn't say they're rude, they're just abrupt, you know. They're not really into being friendly sometimes, you know. They are very friendly. Sometimes they're very, very nice. And they're hard to get to know. They're not like Americans. They're not phony the way that we're all like, hey, I'm your best friend. They're more like, you know, I went to the same guy to get chicken skewers 4 days in a row for my son, who's a, you know, picky little shit. And the guy, after about the fourth day, he sort of like, you know, smiled and made jokes with me, you know, and that's kind of, I think it's a hard place to get to know. And it's not necessarily an easy place to love. But in some ways, it was kind of like the best trip I've ever been on. And that isn't because it was so like awe-inspiring or mind-blowing, but because it really allowed me to absorb more about what the country is like and who they are and where they're at in history than anything else, you know? And so it was a pretty interesting experience.